What is going on, everybody? This is the Negro Shotty, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit about the new Spider Man animated series that Disney just started last week. This week was the third episode. They did a two-parter. They did a two-part episode last week. I kind of want to talk about this series, and the reason why I want to sort of give you guys my thoughts on this series is because the Spider-Man animated series has seen better days. The last good Spider-Man series, in my opinion, was the Spectacular Spider-Man, and with a lot of with a lot of Disney's with a lot of Disney's cartoon shows, they have completely they just completely dumbed down pretty much everything that you would love about these superhero cartoon shows. It's not just the nostalgia talking, because like here's the thing, it's not even just the nostalgia talking, because even back in the day with the original Spider-Man with the original Spider-Man cartoon, it seemed like the writing was a lot stronger back then. It seemed like even looking at the original Spider-Man, even back in 2009 when I started to like rewatch the older Spider-Man, I could still get into it. Like, not only was the humor back then was a lot better, and it seems like what they're doing now with a lot of their cartoon shows, it seems like they have really dumbed down the humor. They dumbed down the humor. They dumbed down a lot of the dramatic elements of these cartoon shows, because it feels like it just, like, I can't even really put it into words how much this just it isn't where it should be, even for a kid show. I mean, maybe, like, of course there are gonna be some kids. There are kids that are going to be able to consume these shows, and they are the target. Like, make no mistake, because they are the target demographic. But the thing is that these shows could be written a lot better. Elements of these shows, plot points, and stuff that's gonna happen in the future of these shows could be done a lot better. And with this Spider-Man series, one thing I will say that I'm happy that they did, that the Ultimate Spider-Man was like the last Spider-Man series that they did, and that one was horrible. They leaned too much into his humor, into the humor side of Spider-Man, and for real, I just thought that the humor wasn't on par. It was very, again, this is supposed to be a children's TV show, but there's a way to write your show in a way, cause you could write the show in a way that it's consumable for somebody who is older than the age of 10. And if the kids like it, that's fine. That is really what matters at the end of the day. But like I was saying earlier, with me rewatching the 1990s Spider-Man, even back then, back in 2009, it's still the way that the story was being told, and just everything about it, I can still consume it. I can still watch it. Like, take something like Ratchet and Clank, for example. This is just a video game for those of you guys who don't know. Ratchet and Clank has this. It has great writing. It's always had great writing and great humor. It had humor in the games that, a lot of this humor is so adult, but it'll go over the head of children, so like they can still play the game, and not, and basically, like, they won't get certain jokes, but they'll still be able to have a good time with it. Like, it can serve as two different audiences, and I guess that's the issue with a lot of these with a lot of these new Disney cartoon shows. Also, with Ultimate Spider-Man, and then the Avengers show that they did after Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the animation was another big problem. And I will say with this new Spider-Man series, I think that the animation, I don't like the art style. I'm just gonna go ahead and say this. I don't like the art style of the new Spider-Man. And even with the Ultimate, I would rather have Ultimate Spider-Man's animation, to be honest. Or at least, I'll say that I would want Ultimate Spider-Man's art style. I think the animation looks a lot better with this one, but I just don't like the art style. I also don't, and this show does something else that I think the Ultimate Spider-Man series did that annoyed the heck out of me. Because with the Ultimate Spider-Man, what they tried to do was they try to team Spider-Man up with all these other heroes, and they just wouldn't let Spider-Man be Spider-Man. They wouldn't let Spider-Man go off on his own and handle things on his own, and that is something that I liked about Spectacular Spider-Man and about the 1990s version of Spider-Man. It was Peter Parker struggling on his own to try to lead this life of both Spider-Man and Peter Parker, going to school but also having to stop crime. And with Ultimate Spider-Man, what they try to do was they try to team him up with all these different superheroes, right? And then they made it seem like Spider-Man wants to be an Avenger so bad. He wants he is so envious of Tony Stark. They brought too much of the Avengers into this, and even with this show, I will say I can accept what they did with the newer show with this new show, that they are what they're doing. They're putting Easter eggs throughout all these episodes, like in this week's episode. The Jackal had one of Tony Stark's weapons, or one of Stark Industries technology. They have little Easter eggs that kind of reference Iron Man, Tony Stark, but they're not like putting it in your face about the Avengers, which I can appreciate. But with Ultimate Spider-Man, I mean, it was just Spider-Man and his friends, fighting crime. And I just wanted it to be Spider-Man. Just Spider-Man on his own. Spider-Man doesn't have to want to be an Avenger so badly. That is not the way that they should have handled Spider-Man. And with this series, I will say this. I think that the writing, like I said, the writing in the series, it could be done a lot better. The way that Spider-Man seems to talk to himself all the freaking time, Spider-Man is just talking to himself over and over. I feel like the show just isn't written. It just isn't written well, because even back in the day, you would have Peter Parker monologuing, basically. Well, not monologuing. Well, I guess that's the best way. Like he's narrating. Basically, like back in the 1990s Spider-Man, I think Spectacular Spider-Man did this also, where like they would have Peter basically thinking. They'll have him thinking certain things, but they wouldn't have them they wouldn't have Peter talking to himself constantly. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense for him to just be talking out loud. And the thing is, when Peter is talking out loud, other characters will be right beside him, and they'll just ignore what he said or whatever. Like y'all not gonna address the fact that this man was just talking about this or that. It doesn't seem realistic. And again, I understand this is a kid's cartoon. I understand what the demographic is, so I understand like some of the jokes in these first 3 episodes really bad. And I feel like going back to what I was saying earlier, it seems like they're leaning way too much into jokes and to trying to make things funny. They don't want to make things serious. I think that's one of the big problems with a lot of these Disney superhero cartoons nowadays. Like compare any of the newer Spider-Man, any of the newer Disney superhero TV shows to something like Young Justice. Young Justice was serious. It was serious, but it was still consumable by both kids and adults. I mean, it had some mature storytelling, and I guess that's the problem here. It's just like they want to keep the storytelling. They want to keep everything so lowbrow and so on like a seventh grade level, on like a seventh to eighth grade level. Like they don't want to make the. I guess they don't want it to be too complicated. But the thing is, even something like Spectacular Spider-Man, when we were kids, I mean, it's so much more complex and so better written than this show. And it seems within the first few episodes, because here's another issue that I have. Outside of Norman Osborn, who I'll admit that Norman Osborn has been done well so far in this show. I like what they're doing with this character, especially it's way better than what they did with Ultimate Spider-Man. But something that I will say, within the first few episodes, outside of Dr. Octavius, who they do have a cameo. They have like a small cameo in like the second episode of Dr. Octavius, and I don't like the fact that they made him younger. But outside of that character, and of course, Osborn, they also have Harry Osborn. Outside of those characters, the villains that Peter fights as Spider-Man, they are underdeveloped. They are just completely underdeveloped. By the time that Peter fights these guys, they have already got their suit. They already got their suit. They already got their powers or whatever. They are already these villains. They're not developed at all. You don't care about them. They're very one-dimensional. And I know there might be some people who might think that that's not a big deal. But here's the thing. Go back and watch an episode. Like, go back and watch some of the episodes from, like, the 1990s. The 1990s animated series. Something like the Reptile. The Reptile. I'm blanking on the super villain's name. The Lizard. Something like the Lizard, right? I think that's his name. I'm totally blanking on dude's name, but something like Connors, right? Connors who turns into the lizard villain. His story is so tragic in the original animated series. There's a reason why Spider-Man's villains are so great, and they all have a sort of backstory to them. And I feel like they're not taking their time with some of these villains. Like even in this week's episode, we have the Jackal. He's already the Jackal by the time we get into the episode. By the end of the episode, and I guess this is a spoiler for this week's episode, but by the end of the episode, we find out that pretty much the Jackal is the uncle of Gwen Stacy. And it's just like we don't get to really get to understand, what happened to the Jackal. I'm pretty sure they're going to address that in a later episode. But even with somebody like the Scorpion, and I believe it was like episode 2 or whatever, the Scorpion wasn't even developed at all. And even someone like the Vulture, they quickly kind of brush over. They quickly try to brush over his main motivation, and it just results in a very underdeveloped villain. And yeah, I'm taking this very seriously because you don't have to keep quickly rush through your villains like that. They don't need to do that at all. And then another issue that I have, because according to Wikipedia, they're gonna try to team. They're gonna do a team up thing again with Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen. And I hate the idea of Spider-Gwen. I completely hate this stupid character. But of course, because Spider-Gwen and Miles Morales is basically like they're popular characters, that is pretty much the only reason why they want to do this. Between these characters just being popular characters, and they basically want to capitalize on that. For lack of a better word, they want to take advantage of the fact that these characters are popular. So why not just put them together? And I don't like the idea of having all these different Spider-Man all these different Spider-Man at one time. That kind of takes away the fact that, Spider-Man is unique. That takes away from Peter Parker. This is Peter Parker's story. And I don't this goes back to one of my issues with Ultimate Spider-Man. Having Spider-Man kind of team up, and it didn't even feel like Spider-Man show. Like Ultimate Spider-Man didn't even feel like a Spider-Man show. It felt like Spider-Man and his amazing friends. Like it felt like Spider-Man and all his groupies. It felt like a mini version of the Avengers, because every 5 seconds, Nick Fury or Iron Man, somebody from the Avengers or something, like someone who's involved with the Avengers would come out and just start talking to Peter Parker or tell him what to do or whatever, and Peter would really want to be an Avenger. I thought that crap was so stupid, like I said earlier. And with the way that they introduced Gwen. The way they introduced Gwen Stacy, and especially the way that they introduced Miles Morales, it doesn't feel organic. It doesn't feel like something like even if you're going to do this, even though I don't want you to, even if you're going to do this, even if they were going to basically team Peter Parker up, at least have it happen later on. Like you need to properly kind of weave these characters into the story. And that's not what they're doing here. I bet that these characters are going to quickly become their comic book superhero identities really quick, because even in this episode they're kind of showing how Gwen Stacy is smart. They're showing how she could kind of help, how she could help Peter out, later down the line. I mean, honestly, I think it's a bad idea, and again, it just goes back to what they did with the Avengers. And with this week's episode, I think they didn't even really develop the villains in this episode either. They had Herman and Clayton, which were using these kind of different technology with like sound and stuff. Here's the thing. I like their powers in this episode, but the villains themselves are just completely underdeveloped. It felt like Clayton and Herman, the way that they were fighting in this episode, I mean, they quickly turned on each other. They just they did it real quick. It's like they should have really built up to that. They didn't really build up to that. They just wanted a conflict quickly. This series, the thing I can say is that at least it's better than Ultimate Spider-Man. But to be honest, this show has already done a lot of things that I don't like within the first 2 episodes. And I'm thankful that in this week's episode, because I just watched all 3 episodes back to back before I started this video. I'm thankful that at least in this week's episode we didn't get an Uncle Ben flashback, because within the first 2 episodes they did an Uncle Ben flashback. Okay, the first episode I'll cut y'all some slack. Y'all had to put in the great power with great power comes great responsibility thing. But in the second episode, y'all didn't need to do it again. So I'm hoping that isn't something that isn't kind of like a reoccurring thing. Like we don't need Peter Parker constantly flashing back to when Uncle Ben is alive, trying to give him words of wisdom. We really don't need that every 5 seconds. So overall, I think that the series is going to be way better than the Ultimate Spider-Man in some places. But honestly, I think this series is going to have the same problems that the newer Avengers cartoon had. The Hulk show that they did years ago, Agents of Smash or whatever the heck that crap was called. And Ultimate Spider-Man, it's gonna eventually have the same problems. And the only way to rectify those problems is to get better writers and to stop and to really just stop handicapping yourself by just saying, okay, we're going to write this show. We're gonna write this show only for kids, or we're just gonna. No, it's not even that they're just writing the show only for kids. It's just the fact that they're writing it in a way that it's not smart. It's not much. It doesn't even necessarily have to be mature, but I mean, it needs to be a lot better than this. I mean, just because it's a kids cartoon doesn't mean that the writing can't be good. It doesn't mean that the humor can't be smart. Like you can't have like witty dialogue and good dialogue. Like some of the dialogue in these episodes aren't very good. And something I will say that I like, and I know I'm kind of going all over the place with this, so I apologize. But something I will say that I like what they did in this in the first few episodes is the way that they did the spider sense, the way they did the Spidey sense. I like that. I don't like the idea of. I've never liked the idea of having like the web fluid. I like the idea of Spider-Man being able to shoot webs as his natural power. I never liked the idea of like web cartridges and stuff like that. I never really liked that idea, but they went with that with this series. But yeah, overall, I think that this series is gonna be slightly better than Ultimate Spider-Man, but Disney still has a problem. They are way behind. They are way behind DC in terms of animation. In terms of the live action stuff that Disney does, that Marvel does, they're way better than DC when it comes to live action. But they can learn a thing or two from DC when it comes to making a good animated superhero TV show. They can definitely learn from DC. So I didn't even mean for this video to be 22 minutes. So I apologize for the long video. Let me know what you guys thought about the first 3 episodes of this new Spider-Man animated series. Like the video, subscribe if you guys want to see more videos like this in the future. I'll see you guys next time. This has been Negro Shotty. I'm out of here. Peace.